All right. Good morning or good afternoon, whatever time you guys are listening to us. We are back for another episode of the Layman's AI podcast. I am Adam.
And I am Brian.
And Brian, today we're pretty excited to talk about data. Something I am
Hmm.
not the expert on between the two of us. I don't think either one of us is an expert, but nevertheless, we have
Yeah.
a fair amount of knowledge.
Yes.
So when you said you wanted to do an episode on data, I instantly thought, oh my God, that's awesome. I love the Goonies. I love
Hmm.
data. And I just recently found out you have never seen the Goonies.
Yeah, I know. I've never seen the Goonies. A
Oh,
lot of
goodness.
people are confused, and maybe I'll have to see it before I kick the bucket. Who knows?
I feel like it's one of those movies that's a rite of passage that everybody has to watch at least once in their life. The good news is when I watched it with my kids, it still stood the test of time. They loved it. And fun fact, the young man that plays Data was also in a character in the Indiana Jones and the Temple
Hmm.
of Doom. Have you seen that one?
Interesting. I've seen the Temple of Doom. Yes,
Okay.
I'm not that uncultured. So.
Well, okay. Well, speaking of culture, let's throw a little trivia question in for you. You have the
Hmm.
Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Hmm.
The character's name is Short Round, or his nickname is Short Round. And when he is discovered in the movie, Indiana Jones falls into the car. The fun Easter egg was the name of the club that he left. Do you
No,
do you happen to know the name of the club that he
do
left?
do not know. Sorry.
Okay, it was a Star Wars reference. It's actually called Club Obi-Wan. And it's really in
Oh,
the
okay.
background. So when we meet
Oh,
Short
you
Round for
know
the
what?
first time, it's because he's fallen out of Club Obi-Wan.
Yeah, I think I've seen that on a Star Wars group, and I'm on Facebook. So yeah, I may have seen that
Yeah.
now you mentioned it.
I believe there's a Star Wars reference in all of the movies at some point. I know in the
Yeah.
hieroglyphics there's one, but I don't want to get
Yeah,
too off topic. I could talk about that all day long. I love movies. I love little trivia like that.
that'll be our next
And
podcast.
that should be AI and how it's going to impact movies.
Yes,
Actually, that might be one. Okay,
that's gonna be
so
something.
we are talking about data today, which I know doesn't sound exciting, but with a little bit of research I've done this week and what you've done already, it's probably one of the most important things that nobody's talking about.
Yeah, this data is the heart of AI. You cannot have AI without data. You cannot train AI without data. It needs data to exist. And I
Right.
think I've said this to a lot of people, like AI is data, and using data, training data, analyzing data, knowing data, and pretty much the theme is data. And a lot of people, think of like data sets and everything,
Hmm.
where you get like medical data, what's your heartbeat at each second and everything like that. Like you have, uh, basically that kind of structure, and that actually helps train a lot of AI models. So.
Right. And what was interesting for me this week is when we were talking about how this was going to be the topic, it was very interesting to me to learn that that I instantly think data is like algorithms, mathematical
Hmm.
formulas, and text upon text, but I didn't realize images are a part of that. Audio is a
Yes.
part of that training. There are many things. It's basically anything and everything can be used as data to train an AI model as long as it can fit on a computer.
Yeah, basically, anything like we can train our voice recording is the
Right.
data. And that's what a lot of these models are starting to do is some people read a novel. They'll read, a bunch of poems and everything, and they'll get all kinds of audio recordings, and that will train your voice. Your voice is data. It'll get your pitch, it'll get your emotions and everything. And the more audio samples you have, and the more data points you have, the more accurately it'll pick up its voice. Whereas machine learning data, and this is where people kind of get the Terminator Skynet idea,
Uh-huh.
when you're doing the machine learning, it takes a lot of hard data like scientific in those data sheets like Excel spreadsheets. Another big one is SQL databases and everything. And kind of give you an example, one project I think we did meat consumption per capita, for, I think I may have mentioned this before, per country and
Right.
everything.
This is the one where it
And
gave you the wrong country or something, right?
yeah, we got the wrong data set, so we had to get the right data set. And we took the population of each country per year and how it trends over a year-to-year basis. And I think we had about 30 or 40 years worth of data right there. And we took the meat consumption per capita. And it has, how many pounds of chicken like each country eats per capita for, over the time period and everything. And we were able to combine those, and based on the population trends, we were able to predict population trends over the next 10 to 15 years. And that's what a lot of the machine learning type data is they take all the data points, the scientific data points like the temperatures they can take pressures and everything, and they can make predictions based on what the input is going forward.
Okay. All right. And when we were doing our investigation or our research into data, we learned that there was different types of data
Hmm.
that can be trained. And the first one is the basic one that I assume most of us think of when we think of training AI, and that is our structured data,
Hmm.
organized information like spreadsheets and existing databases already. That's
Yeah,
that's your
that's
structured data.
Yeah, that's kind of what I basically just explained. We
Hmm.
just didn't mention it prior to it, but yeah, that's what's going to be a lot of your data is structured. That's what a lot of medical machine learning and all the other types of machine learning are really done through like kind of structured data like that.
Okay.
And that's where you see all the data sheets essentially, and you just look at all the data sheets and you think boring, but once you
Hmm.
actually start to play with it, you could parse the data in any way you want. Like you can eliminate columns, you can eliminate rows, so you can just focus on one thing. Like I know we did a sort of machine learning model on air quality
Oh,
index with based on the 2020 COVID lockdowns, and
okay.
we sort of based it like how much of an effect did it have. So we used a small data set, I will admit, but we used like 3 years, like a year before, the year during the pandemic, and the year after the pandemic. And what was interesting, and this is like what I love about data, it proved that it made no difference in the air quality index, at
Wow.
least for the small data set that we use. Now, I will admit we only use one type of air pollutant, or
Okay.
like one or two types of air pollutants, and there's a lot of them. But unfortunately, we were um, pressed for time essentially, and we
Okay.
only had so much time to actually get everything done. So we had to use a very small data set. But it was interesting, but we definitely need more research, which was kind of shocking. I thought we were going to see a definitive difference, but no, did
Hmm.
not see anything.
Well, I think for your next project, you guys should look at the Canadian wildfires and how that impacts the air quality in the United States, because it seems to be a thing now. Once every so many years, we get those Canadian wildfires affecting our air. So,
Yeah, yeah, that's
uh,
that's another one to take a look at. And
so
yeah, go ahead.
So we have the structured data sets, and then there's
Hmm.
unstructured data sets, which I found interesting because that's content that comes from your emails, social media posts, and videos. And what I
Hmm.
find interesting about this is when I use those as examples of unstructured data, those are all things that may have pre-existing context. It's not like a data sheet or structured data. It
Yeah.
is there's pre-existing context, like the email that the data, or excuse me, the email that the AI thing is pulling from, the AI tool is pulling from
Hmm.
that has context behind it, and it has to
Yeah.
try to understand that in order to process it correctly and move forward with it. And social media posts, I mean, you and I have seen this. I mean, social media, it's got some great benefits to it, but it's also got, idiotic things that happen that get said and posted all the
Yeah.
time. All the
Yeah.
time. Usually, sports fans from my rival cities, but other than that, there's a lot of things in social media that the AI is getting trained on, and that might not be a good thing in these unstructured data sets.
Yeah, that's it's always interesting to see what's on social media. I learned sort of just get entertained by the comment section sometimes because you don't know where people are coming from or what they're going to say. Sometimes I think they just say these things because they're behind a screen and don't have to say it to somebody. But yeah, it's unstructured is just a whole mess of data. I like to put it like if you're a detective and you're at the crime scene, you have all these pieces of evidence, all this information. The entire crime scene is your data set, and you don't know what it is. You can find a phone, you can find a piece of paper, you can find a shoe print, you can find all this stuff. And you have to take that data and put together the story, essentially. And it's unstructured. It doesn't know what is going on. And that's kind of what you do with unstructured data is you take all this and you analyze what's going on in the room. And that's where things like
Okay.
natural language processors come in, which is the heart of LLMs essentially.
Okay.
And
Tying it back to last week.
yep, yeah, and that's where a lot of this unstructured data comes in. And it almost seems to me like it needs some structured data to actually make sense of unstructured data if I'm kind of looking at it because the picture identifiers and such.
Okay. Now, just using the first two terms that we've talked about, we've got more. We've talked about
Hmm.
structured data and unstructured data. Now I'm starting to visualize this as like a giant puzzle that can come together,
Yeah.
where your structured data may be the pieces of the puzzle that are painted specifically so you know where they go because you know all the
Hmm.
red pieces need to be in this section and this pieces. Then there's your unstructured ones, which are probably the puzzle pieces that look funny or may not fit in certain parts or the colors are vary
Hmm.
and they could go many places. And then that brings us to this third data set that we're going to talk about called labeled data, which
Hmm.
is basically data that's tagged with specific identifiers.
Yeah.
Crucial for supervised learning is a particular component that we discussed. And I guess if we're going to do labeled data, I guess I would say those are the edges of the puzzle pieces in
Hmm.
terms of you know they go on the outside so you put them on the outside and if you see what
Yeah.
you know the corner pieces have to go in the corner so
Hmm.
it's data that's being fed but it's there for a very specific reason.
Yeah, like label data, the way I always have taken it, I mean, I will admit I'm not an expert in anything, but this is where you want predetermined answers. Like, and this is where effective AI model training can come in. Like, for example, if you're doing some sort of vision AI identifier and you want a robot to pick ripe apples,
Hmm.
essentially, you feed it as many pictures of what a ripe apple looks like. And you say these are photos of ripe apples, and it goes through that whole data set and it says, okay, this is what a ripe apple should look like with these characteristics.
Hmm.
And then you go, these are unripe apples, don't pick them. And you feed it, the same thing. Here's a set of pictures of unripe apples. And then you could also do the same thing with diseased apples, bug infested apples, and you could train it to do something along those lines. So that's
Okay.
where a lot of the label data, kind of what I see it useful is if you have a specific purpose and you have a specific identifier that you want your process to really take action with.
Okay. So that's your labeled data. Then, and I know our audience doesn't know this, but prior to this, you and I have a quick discussion. Prior to recording, we
Hmm.
have a quick discussion about what we're going to talk about, how we're going to structure it, and how we move forward. And tonight we went down a rabbit hole before we even started,
Yeah.
and it came up with this topic right here, this synthetic data which
Hmm.
I'd like you to touch base on, but this is basically, and stop me if I'm incorrect on this is basically artificially generated information that mimics statistical properties.
Yeah, essentially. I have kind of a definition here. I'll read it off. Is synthetic data is artificially generated information crafted to statistically mirror real-world data sets without containing any original identifiable details. It sort of works as a powerful substitute for real data if you have like gaps or anything. Um, this one to me can kind of be a big risk here.
Yeah,
I
that
can,
was the heart of our discussion. We
yeah.
we read the quick definition and we said, wait a minute, and we both started talking about how this could go wrong.
Yeah, there's some positives to it. I know there's like definitely some good things. Um, you could have like accuracies and everything. It could be what you want it to be because when you're doing data sets, a lot of times when you're cleaning it up and parsing it to give it a real world example or what have you, you have to eliminate the outliers. There's no outliers or anything, so that could be a positive thing there.
Hmm.
Um, but like you said, synthetic, it could be what you want it to be, and essentially, if you want to make it that way. So this is a really touchy thing in my opinion. You really got to be careful using
Yes.
synthetic data. I could see, a positive. I think we touched base on this uh
Hmm.
offline, and you could use it for any sort of training for a real world scenario. Like if
Right.
you're any scenario really, and you want a predetermined set of reactions to any action you take, and sort of kind of mix it in like that. Like if you're talking to an angry customer, and you like give it responses and everything, and you want this people to handle the angry customer in a proper way, and you could use synthetic data to kind of guide them towards that. I can see kind of that
Hmm.
as a real world example of something positive.
And we also searched for real world examples that we could explain because we were both
Hmm.
trying to think. We went down the rabbit hole kind of in a negative way in terms of how this could be
Yeah.
scary. So we wanted to find something positive. And I'm not sure if our listeners are aware of this. I was not aware that this thing existed until a couple of weeks ago when I was listening to a different podcast. But there is
Hmm.
a self driving car that's basically Uber, but it's self driving cars. It's in some of our heavy tech cities like San Jose, Austin, Texas, and it's called Waymo. And Waymo uses synthetic data to simulate diverse driving scenarios, including rare and dangerous situations. Basically, it takes images and videos and it allows AI models to learn how to recognize obstacles like traffic signs and other
Hmm.
vehicles in the way that as it drives. So
Yeah.
that's an example of synthetic data being used to make your drive, I guess, safer. Even though
Hmm.
that could seem scary to some people, it's being used today, and that is an example of how it's being used.
Yeah, yeah, that's a whole nother philosophical discussion of
Right.
self-driving cars right there. But I mean, yeah, like I think the whole point is you got to be careful with synthetic data. Like, what are you going to use it for?
Hmm.
And if you use it for very specific purposes, I think it has its benefit, but I really think it does have a lot of negative impacts if it's ambiguously used by the wrong actors or
Right.
anything.
And if
So,
what if it's training itself incorrectly?
yeah,
That's a whole nother issue that you and I just touched base on.
yeah, like you can use it to train incorrectly and then you have an incorrect data set, but then, other models can pick up on some synthetic data and that could be incorrect and um it could be scary. It could be
Hmm.
scary.
Well, we just touched base on this. I'd like to move on to so we've talked about types of data.
Hmm.
Could you tell us a little bit about the learning process? How does AI, just touch base on this. I know this is probably its own
Yeah.
episode,
Hmm.
and you and I have talked about that, but
Yeah.
to tell us a little bit about the AI learning process and what it does with all these data sets, depending on the type that it is.
Yeah, I mean, learning data right here is basically you take the data that's already there and you want to train it for whatever purposes you have for like predictive qualities and what have you. I know there's a lot of prepackaged Python libraries that people spent years putting together that you could download and use for like one is linear regression uh, type learning where you want to see a pattern over time. That's what I found it was good with. There's also a decision tree classifier model
Ooh.
where you can like it says, okay, make this decision, go here, go here, go here, go here, and you end up with a solution based on a set of decisions. That's getting a little technical on the side of things, but that's basically how you do a lot of your data training right there. And what comes up with is you get an accuracy score. And once the training model starts to run through, it takes your existing data. It's like, okay, I'm going to calculate this and we're going to run back and see how accurate it is. This is, okay, I'm 70%
Okay.
confident. And then it keeps running and running. And then I would say once you get about 90% confidence is kind of the sweet spot with training your data, or at least when I was studying, that's kind of what we kind of concluded as a class. Because you have two
Okay.
types of things. You have overfitting and underfitting. And that's if you get not accurate enough, you're not going to get good predictions. But if you get too accurate with your predictions, it will not be able to handle any deviations, where that's where overfitting your model kind of comes in. So this is where the art sort of meets the science
Wow, I find
type
that
thing right
fascinating.
there.
It sounds like a healthy balance. Like you need some type
Yeah.
of a balance on that.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to eat that cupcake if you're bodybuilding. So, uh, but that's
I like that.
but yeah, so yeah, I mean that's basically there's a lot more to it.
Mhm.
I'm trying to give you a basic synopsis here. And
I
I've
think
always
you've
admitted I'm not an accurate expert, but that's essentially what training data is.
right, and I think you've done a good job touching base on that. I know we said that that could probably be its own episode, how AI is trained in
Hmm.
the variety of differences. But what this does do is it lead us into the importance of the data quality.
Hmm.
The quality of the data that the AI tool is being trained on, in particular, what and we talked about several aspects of this accuracy, as you stated, is
Hmm.
extremely important because it makes sure that the outputs are correct and reliable. It's like you said, with 70% accuracy is fine, but that's not where we want it. We really want it to be at that 90%.
Hmm.
But then that takes us into the biases and fairness issue
Yeah, that's
when you get the poor data quality.
yeah, that could be because when you have a spreadsheet essentially and you have columns of data, this column, that column, you can easily eliminate a column with some simple Python programming. It is not a difficult thing to do at all. So that's where, if you don't like some of the data that's coming through, so you eliminate a column, be like, oh, now I'm getting what I like. And I think that's kind of the scary thing. I'm not trying to like, scare our audience or anything or scare anybody and thinking that, programmers are behind the scenes trying to manipulate you. Not all of them. I mean, some,
Hmm.
you know, like with anything, there's bad actors.
Right.
So
I have
it's
no doubt
difficult.
there are AI tools that have been trained poorly on purpose to give
Hmm.
bias. There's no doubt in my mind. Do I think they all do that? No, I don't. I think people want an accurate, reliable AI system that we could use or AI tool that we can use.
Yeah, that's the big thing right there, and it all comes down to sourcing. When we were writing
Right.
papers in school, you always had to cite your sources, and if you don't cite your sources, all we know is you could be making it up. So I think when you do AI models, you really need to, cite your sourcing and where your data comes from,
Hmm.
personally, because you could also inadvertently. Um, create a bias that you didn't think about, essentially.
Right.
I can't think of any real world examples off the top of my head. Well, actually, spending money on medical issues. I think this is like something we talked about with like ethics and everything. And if you use this data and found out that, okay, this area right here, they're spending more money, so we need to divert more resources to that area of, public funding for hospitals and such. Well, if you dig deeper into it, that could be a very wealthy area with very expensive doctors.
Hmm.
And, obviously, if you're sitting on money, you can go to a more expensive doctor. So the cold that you have and go to the doctor for, you can essentially pay more money for somebody who has a serious illness in like a poor area because they're going to a free clinic. And that's where some like I don't think it's uh I think it's more inadvertent people can do stuff like that.
Hmm.
So that's kind of you gotta be very careful about, that bias you're talking about.
Yeah. And the thing I keep going back to is what you said is when we wrote papers in high school or college or whenever, we had to cite our sources. And the more reliable the sources, the better the performance of the paper, the better grade you got. And that's kind of how it is
Hmm.
with AI. The better the data, the more highly performance that it is. It's one of the reasons I'm a big fan of Perplexity AI, which is essentially not even like an LLM. It's just a search engine that does really well. But what I love about it is it cites its sources and you could click it and go visit it immediately.
Yeah,
So you know
that's
where it pulled from. I know when it pulls from, when I'm looking for data and it pulls stuff from the Pennsylvania Department of Education and I'm looking for educational data, that's an excellent source for me to get data from.
yeah, I know. I've like a lot of LLMs I've been using. I've been noticing been putting links in a lot of their bullet points,
Yes, I have
and
noticed that lately. I
and
feel
at the
like Perplexity may have been the one that started that.
yeah, I mean, it's a good thing to have. I would
I
encourage
agree.
anybody using an LLM or putting an LLM together. All these LLM companies, put those source links in there. I would say
Absolutely.
because that would definitely go a long way into building that trust with AI.
And
I think.
a piece of advice I'd like to give our listeners is if you do see links to them, make sure you click them to make sure that they're real.
Hmm.
Because
Yes.
AI can hallucinate links as well. It
Hmm.
can hallucinate where it got information from. It got it from somewhere reliable,
Hmm.
but it may not be exactly where they said they got it from, which is kind of
Hmm.
a concern, especially if you're saying, well, ChatGPT said this and this was its source, but that source doesn't exist on the spot. How can you
Hmm.
verify that?
Yeah, and another interesting thing I kind of do is I go back and I say, "Hey, you missed this or this is incorrect," and they'll go be rethink and be like, "Oh yeah, that's right." And you could
Oh,
actually
yeah, trick it
correct
into,
you can correct the LLM,
yo, you could
and
correct it and you could
yeah,
trick it to believe it was wrong.
yes, and it's
Yeah.
kind of you can have some fun right there. I wonder how much computing power money is wasted on that.
Yes,
But
and there's a new trend right now in prompting where when you get a strange result and you're trying to verify it, you ask why twice,
hmm
not once, twice. And I can imagine that's a lot of data right there out the or computation power right out the door. However, when you get to the second answer, it gives you better reasons as to why it put the answer that it gave.
Yeah, it's prompting is definitely an interesting thing, but
Oh, that's like a four-part episode.
oh yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
I've learned so many tricks over the years, and it's funny. I still keep going back to the basics, but there are some neat things you could do with prompting.
hmm Definitely.
So let's move forward. We're talking about data. What does this mean for the layman? What does this mean for the everyday person? And we saw some real world implications
hmm
on the data. So there's data on you. And one of the best examples I could think of is AI uses your data to suggest products or movies. I will tell you right now, Netflix,
Yeah.
notorious for what shows do you like? What shows do you
hmm
watch the most? I don't think people realize Netflix is tracking you when you're watching trailers
mm
to make your suggestions for your next topics. And there was actually a crazy stat, and I don't recall, it was over a year ago, and
hmm
it was a crazy stat where people on Friday nights are more likely to watch trailers of shows that they'd be interested in than they are to actually start a new series.
Hmm.
And
Interesting.
I have been guilty of that in terms of like finding movies, documentaries, and things like that. Netflix has shown me so many that I'm interested in, and then I just can't get started. It's almost like I get so worked
Okay.
up I can't pick.
Nice, nice. Yeah, that's yeah, that's a lot of one that gets used I mean, when you're like searching through any really any of those streaming services now that's like recommended for you, and
Hmm.
they do a lot of other kinds of recommendations and everything.
Yeah, and that
Ba yeah, basically any kind of like shopping or anything like that will do that as well.
I think that's going to get worse. I actually think their AI is going to crack the code to constantly put the stuff that we want in our face, and we're going to shop more as a result of it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one.
Hmm.
Um, Let me see what other yeah,
Oh,
medical healthcare
healthcare
diagnosis.
diagnoses. Yeah.
Yeah, this is another tricky one where you really need honest to God data, and you need a lot of it, essentially. I know WebMD, they have like a self-diagnosing section in there, and I've always had poor results, but that's kind of a form of AI itself.
Hmm.
So,
And
um,
another example, in addition to the healthcare, as we discussed, voice assistants, your Siri
yes.
and Alexa. And I swear, I never use Siri. I don't
hmm
really like Siri, and
Yeah.
she still talks to me at times when I don't want her to talk to me. So that's a little scary there. I hope there's no synthetic data being created there. But
Yeah, I don't know. I
yeah.
don't know.
So
I mean,
Siri and Alexa are another examples of the real world implementations of data being collected on you. And
hmm
then I know this is scary to some people, so we thought we would touch base real quick on how you can protect yourself with data privacy
Yeah.
and consider some ethical issues.
hmm
Just remember, whenever you sign up for an AI tool, you give it consent. Um,
Yeah.
you're you give it consent to take your data of the account that you're using to sign up. So I'll share a quick tip that you guys can do. Whenever I'm testing an AI product or an AI tool, I have a dummy email that has nothing in it that's identifiable to me. It's a fake
Uh-huh.
person. It's a fake email,
Yep.
and I use it to test the tool. And I use my
hmm
usual tests, my usual prompts, and that's what I use so it doesn't get any data. If I like the tool, then I immediately sign up for a real account with my real email, and then it does have access to the data that I wanted to have.
hmm Yeah,
And
I think fake email accounts, having a dummy email account that you just use to sign up for things like that, that definitely that would be a nice little step for privacy, I think, because you can create as many emails as you want really on any service. So,
mhm, yeah.
yeah, all the email services are now about to get flooded with dummy accounts,
Oh,
hey,
absolutely.
but hey, all this,
Absolutely. With all the
yeah,
agent stuff, that's a whole nother episode as well.
yeah,
But yes, they are about to. And
yeah.
something you could do to protect yourself as a user is you could check the user agreements. I know that doesn't sound
Hmm.
sexy at all. That sounds
Yeah.
boring. You can copy, paste it, and put it in ChatGPT
Yeah.
and ask it questions about what data does it take from you. Because I know for a fact there was an AI tool when it came out, and I played with this one under my dummy account. It was called DeepSeek. It's very good. It's very
Hmm.
good, but people were very quick and hesitant because I believe DeepSeek is based out of China,
Hmm.
and it does take data.
Hmm.
It steals your data. I don't know what it does with it, but that was a
Yeah.
concern. It's a concern, and I'm sure DeepSeek's not the only AI that does that.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate on what all these systems are doing. I know, TikTok was one where it started to spread across the data across your phone and everything, and it started
Right.
like harvesting and everything. And what those things really do is they tailor your advertisement feed.
Boy, do
And
they.
they find out exactly what you want, and it can
Yeah.
get scary sometimes. I remember I was on vacation and I flipped open Facebook, just kind of having a morning coffee while I'm, sitting there getting the ocean breeze, and I'm getting advertisements for beach house sales on
Mm-hmm.
the in the exact island I was on, and I'm sitting here, I'm like. I'm
Yeah.
like looking around, like who's watching me, and I'm like, oh, I got location tracker on, and it like tracks your patterns and everything, and it uses this data to really tailor your advertising feed, which to me that's kind of scary.
I'll tell
I'm
you. That
kind of
stuff is
worried about
scary
that.
sometimes. And I'll tell you what, we have one that was a connection from a high school prank that we did. I don't remember if you were in on this one or not. Do you remember the name Chuck Spinagle?
Oh yeah, the pitcher who struck out 29 batters in a game and lost.
29 batters in a game. Yes. Do you remember what team he played for?
No, I don't remember.
He played for the Montreal Expos. For those of you who aren't listening, we
Ah,
had this
Montreal
theory in high school
Expos.
that nobody cared about the Montreal Expos. So we made up a guy named Chuck Spinagle, and we told everybody that he had 29 strikeouts in 10 innings and stuff like that. And they lost the game 1-0, but it was amazing and all this stuff. He played for the Montreal Expos. And he became like a legend amongst our group, only our group.
Hmm.
It didn't take off, it didn't go anywhere. But what was funny was here we were 20 years later almost,
Hmm.
referencing Chuck Spinagle on a Zoom session.
Oh
The
boy.
very next day in my Facebook feed, there was a ad for a throwback Montreal Expos hat.
Oh boy.
That scared me.
Oh boy. Yeah,
That
this
that
is
was a moment where I said, "This is way too powerful."
yeah, I mean yeah, the thing is I can see it tailoring your advertisement feed to the activity on the website itself.
Right.
Like I'm okay with that because you're on that website and whatever you're doing on that site, if it tailors your advertisement feed that way, I am okay with that. So but yeah, like when it starts to spider web across your phone and it gets access to all your accounts,
Hmm.
it's a conversation that needs to be had at the highest levels, I
Right.
think.
There's
And
there needs to be regulation. I think
yeah.
we both agree that I remember a couple years ago the AI Open AI and all of them were going to the government saying we need some regulation because as we've said
Hmm.
it is still the Wild West. And
Yeah.
as consumers we are having to do a little too much to find out what data is being stolen of ours and what's not and
Hmm.
how these
Yeah.
guys are smart. They can hide stuff and get our data if they want it or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, definitely. So it's yeah, it's like I think that goes back into like our regulations point here. There needs to be like major conversations because I
Right.
think the last time there was major internet regulation passed, like in general, was back in the 90s when dial-up internet was a thing.
Wow.
And that's like when major regulation. There's been like little tit for tat kind of stuff here
Hmm.
and there, but with what the internet is now, like even before AI started taking off, it's like a completely different animal.
Absolutely.
And now that you have AI working for you or working against you or with
Hmm.
you, however you want to word it really, there's like a serious need for this regulation to be revisited and needs to be done at the highest levels. So
Yeah.
I'm firm on that stance right there.
And I think we both are, which is pretty funny that we haven't talked to each other in years, and
Hmm.
we both said both of our journeys have led us to believe we need more regulation of this
Yeah.
immediately. And I am happy to say that there was recently some bipartisan regulation, in particular with the unfortunately the terrible use of AI to do revenge pornography against somebody and things like
Yeah.
that. Unfortunately, there is a dark side of AI AI, just like there is
Hmm.
for social media. And one
Yeah.
of these episodes, we probably should explore the bad stuff that is happening so people are aware of it and what they could do to protect themselves. I just had
Yeah.
a recent suggestion was made that we really should do a podcast on what
Hmm.
parents need to know about
Yeah.
AI, and I think that's a good idea
Hmm.
in the weeks to come. Hopefully, we could do something like that. But
Yeah,
there was
definitely.
some recent bipartisan, which was good. Both
Yeah.
sides agreed that we need to do something to prevent this from happening and stop it. So that was a step in the right direction.
Yeah, it definitely needs to be a very long discussion, and we can have like an ethical entire episode of ethics,
Oh yes,
but
that
essentially going back to the core theme of this data, the transparency, like that we like these
right.
LLMs, like they bring up their sources when you ask them a question, or when you're using an AI model for something. Where did you get your data from? How did you get your data? Like that's kind of ties into the regulations. We need to regulate,
Hmm.
how are you getting this data? Where are you getting it from? How does it come to be? Essentially, I'm kind of repeating myself, but
Yeah,
that,
yes,
that
but you're
definitely needs to be.
right. You're right, and we as the consumer have to ask those questions.
Hmm.
It's not just given to us.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this very difficult. I love this wild wild west aspect, this
Hmm.
open LLMs and things like that, but there are some things that scare me because I can wander down a rabbit hole by accident, and I know more than the average person knows about AI, and I could
Yeah.
still get trapped and have my data trapped, or
Hmm.
they know too much about me. I got scared the first time I used ChatGPT, and I said, when it had its image generator, and I said, generate an image of me of what you think I look like.
Yeah.
I was a little scared because it was way off, but it had
Yeah.
me as blonde. But what I
Hmm.
didn't like is it had me in a University of Michigan polo shirt. And if anybody knows me, they know I'm a big Michigan fan. And there wasn't really much interaction with me and Michigan and ChatGPT. So I don't know where it got it from, but
Yeah, that could
somehow it's
be a
pulling parts, it's
difficulty.
connecting puzzle pieces.
Yeah, I don't like that either,
Yeah.
personally. So that's kind of our whole thing. But Adam, any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, I think we did a good job. I guess my big takeaway from tonight's episode is you haven't seen the Goonies. Uh,
Oh,
but
that's the one you want to focus on. Okay,
no.
that's fine. Maybe I'll go watch the Goonies this weekend. I got a wedding this weekend. Never mind. I got
Oh
maybe I
yeah.
won't watch it this weekend, but maybe I will go watch the Goonies. But yeah, I mean, I think we kind of touched it. I think that was like our big one right there was we need regulation and transparency. I think needs to
Mhm.
be of your data essentially needs to be the core of that regulation. And you know, you can see how many issues there can be with bad data, fake data, or anything like that. So
Absolutely.
it you need to like look at the ethics side of things, and I encourage anybody doing an AI model transparency on your data. Just do it up front. Uh, let your sources be known, like you're writing a term paper.
Right. I would have to
But
agree. A
yeah.
big takeaway for me this week, on all seriousness, this wasn't a topic that I considered myself better than an amateur at, and I
Hmm.
really enjoyed looking into this.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed looking into, okay, what does this mean for the real world? What does this mean for the average person? How are these AI devices trained? Where's this data coming from? The different types of
Hmm.
data. So this was the big takeaway for me is how important it is. And
Hmm.
I really want to go down a rabbit hole another time in the future with this synthetic data.
Yeah, I think we'll look into that in the future. But
Yeah.
yeah, even if you're not training data or doing anything from the coding side of things, research what data is and how this is used, because that'll give you a better understanding and give you a perception when you go to use AI, I think.
Yep.
Definitely. But either way, those are our final thoughts on data. Thank you for listening, everyone. This is a very exciting topic for us.
Mhm.
And we will see you next week on the Layman's AI. My name is Brian,
And I am Adam.
and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.